Greetings, brothers and sisters. Brother John here, president for UNIA-ACL Division 421 in Atlanta. This is session 4 of our Course of African Philosophy Summer School for the year 2024. Again, this is a directive that we took upon ourselves in honor of the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey, his transition being in the month of June. This is a way for the month of June we chose to honor Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So I'll briefly open up the meeting with just the motto. Brother Art, if you'd like, you can help me with the motto. Please put your black fist in the air. Repeat after me. One God. You're on mute.
One God.
One aim.
One aim.
One destiny.
One destiny.
Ladies first. All right. Thank you, Brother Art. Meeting is officially open. And again, session 4, Course of African Philosophy. Tonight, we'll be looking at, I don't know why I named these chapters. These are lessons. We'll be looking at lessons 15 through 21. But before we get to the lessons, one thing that I've done here is incorporate UNIA papers, and I'd like to continue that tonight. Tonight, the year that we're going to be looking at is the 1934, the year of 1934. Previously, we looked at 1940 for the first session, as well as 1936 and 37. No, I think 30. Oh, maybe it's 36. Then we looked at 37 and 38. And now we're looking at 1934. I'm looking at 1934 specifically for a very particular reason, and it'll make sense when we start to look at the Course of African Philosophy. But keep that number, keep that year in mind. As Garveyites, in this time, we have the responsibility of putting the whole story together. So not just Garvey and the UNI in 1920, not just Mr. Garvey's transition in 1940, not just the 2024 convention and 2024 HEC. We have to know the whole story and how we got to where we are from where we were. So this UNIA papers focus on the year 1934. So we'll go through some brief highlights of 1934. One thing that we should remember or realize, International Convention takes place in August. So one thing that I've picked up on every year, there's usually a highlight of events going around in August, and that's where a lot of our official documentation comes into play. So 1934, January 1934, Mr. Garvey starts the year with editorial in the Black Man titled An Appeal to the American Negro, which I think is very timely, considering who we are, where we are. I'm not going to read everything here. I'm just going to read the highlights. So I've got quite a lot of information highlighted. The document has been provided to everyone for their reading. One thing he says here is, I must number you. Because he's talking to the Negro people. Why is he talking to them? How does he view the Negro people? He says, I'm writing to you because among all the people who I love and who have been true and affectionate to me in my efforts to save the Negro race, I must number you as being among the foremost. So he had a special place. Mr. Garvey had a special place for the American Negro in regards to his movement and his program. He says, should I ever forget you, then may God forget me, talking about the American Negro. It says, realizing therefore my duty and responsibility to you, it is for me to seriously charge you over the mistakes and blunders that you make continuously detrimental to your own interests. So again, this is 1934. Mr. Garvey would be, 47 years old at this time. and he's preparing for, I believe this was the sixth international convention. We'll double check. Maybe it was seventh. Popular movement. As far as the Universal Negro Improvement Association is concerned, it has been such a popular movement that it has naturally attracted charlatans, rogues, vagabonds, and schemers of the worst kind to its banner. So, something that we have to be aware of. The more popular we become, the more people that we bring in, the more vagabonds, schemers, and rogues will also be brought in to those numbers. Financially otherwise section, some of them have been so bold as to do it in my name. So he's talking about doing things in the name of the UNIA, in the name of Mr. Garvey. Some other years that hopefully we can study in the future, obviously not with this course, is the years of 1932 and 1929. 1929 signifies the first official split within the UNIA. This is under Mr. Garvey's time. And then 1932 kind of solidified that split with the I'm not going to say formation, but the communication between Mr. Garvey and what he created as UNIA 1929 of the world and what he formerly had of UNIA Incorporated. But he's talking about how people are going around doing things and saying things in his name. He's speaking of UNIA Incorporated. Whilst the Universal Negro Improvement Association and myself languished from the lack of support necessary to carry on the great work in our common interests. No credentials. So again, the splits, that took place caused Mr. Garvey to rethink and restructure representation in the movement. And he's saying basically if people aren't recognized or given credentials by him, you have to be careful of what they are representing. There's no one in the United States as of July 1933 who possesses any credentials for me to represent the Universal Negro Improvement Association in an executive capacity. So again, this is challenging the split, challenging UNIA Incorporated. Prior to July 1933, to represent me personally in the United States, he did have one individual, Mr. E.B. Knox of the city of Chicago. He allowed him to be a representative. So he was an official credentialed representative. Mr. Garvey says, I told him that I had no authority to appoint him as an executive of the organization because for reasons known to myself, I felt there was such chaos in the organization in the United States that it would be unfair to the membership and the divisions to appoint any superior officer, considering that officers who I dealt with in good faith before deceived me and deceived the people and added to the chaos. So he's talking about appointing people as leadership of the UNIA in the United States. Obviously, this is after Mr. Garvey is deported, and again, after the creation of UNIA 1929 of the world. Duty and obligation. Mr. Garvey said, I felt that I owed a duty and obligation to the membership and branches of the organization to allow them to work by themselves until the time had come for me as president general to call them together again in convention for them to determine their own leadership. A crisis. The crisis still exists, but I have been able to minimize it. At the present time, I have no personal representative, nor is there any official representative of the parent body in America specifically. So just solidifying that there's a transition. So as I said, this is 1934, important years, or 1932, 1929 as well. We've read later years, 1937, Course of African Philosophy, 1940, Mr. Garvey's transition. And we should also remember that in 1940, Mr. Garvey had his first health encounter stroke in January. So pretty much the entire year of 1940, Mr. Garvey was ill and recovering. Be it understood, there's no official representative of the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the United States at this present time. So this is a rebuilding of the UNIA, the rebuilding of its representatives. All loyal workers, but I recognize no superior national officer operating among you. My policy, Mr. Garvey says, for many years I have lived in the United States. No one, not even my bitterest enemies, nor the government could charge me of doing anything to subvert the American Constitution or the loyalty of the American people. Give me 1 second. I got a little footnote in there. Philosophy and opinions, not seeking a government. So, in the philosophies and opinions,
I got a question, John.
yes, sir.
How do those splits affect us today?
Save that question. um, 1 second. So let me get to this, and then I'll try to answer that question as best I can. So
Okay.
we just read Mr. Garvey's philosophy. No government could charge me of doing anything to subvert the American Constitution or the loyalty of the American people. In Philosophies and Opinions, Mr. Garvey's got in volume 2, he's got a speech, The Principles of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, delivered November 25th, 1922. In that speech, there's a section titled Not Seeking a Government Within a Government. Mr. Garvey says, the Universal Negro Improvement Association is not seeking to build up another government within the bounds or borders of the United States of America. The Universal Negro Improvement Association is not seeking to disrupt any organized system of government, but the association is determined to bring Negroes together for the building up of a nation of their own. But just re-emphasizing in 2 different times in Mr. Garvey's life, where he's mentioned the same sentiment. How does the split affect us today? Great question. My interpretation of that, I would say, as the young generation of leadership, I would say it doesn't affect us much at all. This in these papers will kind of touch on why I say that, but the thing is, the original UNIA 1918, when it became incorporated, it became a entity of the United States. Thereby, any individual that is not a lawful citizen of the United States cannot claim ownership of this United States entity, Universal Negro Improvement Association Incorporated. So once we incorporated the UNIA and Mr. Garvey was deported, Mr. Garvey lost his ability to direct the UNIA from a executive standpoint. And that's when he had to create UNIA 1929 of the world. This was in Jamaica. This was not under the auspices of the United States, and therefore it was not incorporated. But this was an unincorporated entity that could be managed anywhere throughout the world without the interpretation of the United States legal system. So the reason why I say not much now is because the reason why a lot of this happened in the past was due to, or a lot of the issues that we had in the past is due to legal right. So UNIA Incorporated has legal right to the assets of the UNIA-ACL. in 2024, those assets basically don't exist. So um, it comes down to uh, which body is functioning under the spirit of the ideals in which the organization was founded. That's my take on it. But the fact that there aren't any physical legal assets to fight over, I don't see any. I don't see any issue personally as to why there'll be any disagreement.
The the first two organizations, they still exist.
UNIA, to my understanding, the UNIA Incorporated is the the legacy that Cleo Miller is attached to.
Okay, that's the first one.
Yes.
Okay. Um, I was reading some stuff and I was trying to understand the different divisions. I see that with with our group, some of the divisions that were mentioned are not in there. And I was just wondering how um, how do they function? I mean, are they like us? I mean, damn, it's hard for me to get this question out. Um, I saw a division that was in, I think it was Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that was in Washington D.C. That one was Division 332, but it doesn't seem to exist anymore. But then there's one in D.C. from called 183, and that one is not much information on it. And then there was another one. I think it was from golly, I want to say Cleveland or somewhere in that area. And you get few mentions of it, but you can't find any information on them. So I was just wondering um, why. You know what's going on there? Because I can find more information on RC 2020 than I can any of them.
Hmm. That's a leadership discussion, Brother Art. That's a high executive council um, discussion. I don't have those answers. These are things that took place after Mr. Garvey's transition, and kind of goes into what I had just read about the tarnishing of the name of Mr. Garvey and the legacy of
Yeah, yeah,
the.
yeah. That's
But I don't. I'm a I born in the 80s. I came into this 2018. So what took place, outside of Atlanta prior to 2018, I'm still trying
yeah.
to get a grasp of myself.
Okay,
But,
okay.
but I'm going straight to the documents, the primary sources. So I try to go straight to what Mr. Garvey wrote. The text from his time up until 1940. I use those as the standard. But then I have to rely upon elders and others to kind of fill in that blank of what happened between 1940 and today, which is it's not very
Yeah,
not
because I got the book of African philosophy, and I got three books, and they're all different in a way.
Hmm.
a lot of them have the same information. It's a lot of the same information in them, but they're different. Um, and I'm just trying to figure out which should I read all of them or should I discard some of them? You know what I mean?
No, I do. And again, source information. Whichever one provides the most historical context as to where that text came from. So I prefer the blue and white book. It's got the foreword and the preface, but it tells you Charles L. James was a student of the first class. Um,
Yeah,
all of his classmates had transitioned.
yeah,
They were, in a moment or a time where they thought the information might have been lost. So Charles L. James appoints uh, Tony Martin to create the text. Um,
yeah, yeah.
this
Okay,
this book has that information. So
yeah,
I would expect the other text to have some explanation of, the history of the text. That's to me, that's where you get legitimacy.
okay. All right, I got you.
If the book can't explain where it came from, it's questionable.
Okay, all right,
Okay, let me continue.
okay.
It's a short. We still got a lot of lessons, and it's these papers has a lot of information. It's a lot more than I expected. Directed at the destruction or impairment of the American government and Constitution. So Mr. Garvey's kind of just saying he's never had a policy to go against our um, these nations. America can do, but it's for you to determine a policy and approach. So you have a claim on a nation because you're hundreds of years of service, but it's for you to determine a policy of approach. This is talking about our self-reliance. We have to decide for ourselves what we want to do and can't, continue to allow others to decide for us. So Mr. Garvey is making a plea to the American people, the American Negroes, to stand up and make a direction for themselves, be the captain of our own ship. To lead as a leader of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, it is my duty to reasonably and intelligently lead the Negro toward emancipation everywhere. He's the leader of the entire movement. He can say that. He says, I hope now and henceforth no member of the Universal Negro Improvement Association or follower of mine will give any responsive ear to any organization or individual who seeks to stir revolution or to do things inimical to his particular government. The program of the Universal Negro Improvement Association must be fought on reason and good judgment. Course of African Philosophy teaches us good. Jump over to the text really quick. Course of African Philosophy teaches us that we must use good reason and good judgment to make changes. And I believe this is in the lesson on society, I think. Always disavow any attempt to label the UNIA with riotous behavior. So this is 1937. He's talking about, being in line with the laws, being in line with the system, not being riotous. And we're just reading some of the same things that he said in 1934. So these are the little pieces, Brother Art, we have to kind of be detectives or historical detectives, and kind of go through the evidence and find the matching pieces. But when you see matching pieces from one individual from two different points or two different times in their lives, for me, that's a level of legitimacy. Like, okay, this person, this is the same person. They have the same sentiment. So Mr. Garvey says, whatever object is desired in a civilized community can always be achieved by the approach of good reason and good judgment. Always use good reason and good judgment. So that's
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
so, and then the program of the Universal Negro Improvement Association must be fought on reason and good judgment. So try to make that connection. Okay, next convention. So again, this is 1934. Mr. Garvey's preparing for the upcoming 1934 convention. And we just got to know the history. I don't expect y'all to, everyone to know all of these numbers and the significance of the numbers and be able to envision the timeline. But I do want to implant these numbers into your subconscious. 1934 is the year that we're looking at. We're looking forward to our next international convention to be held at Jamaica during the month of August of the present year. Let us not get away from ourselves and imagine wild things until then, so stay focused. When through your representatives, we can decide upon a concrete and possible program for the continuation for the ideal for which we aim. If you allow people to still deceive you, then the responsibility will not be mine. Course of African Philosophy, Mr. Garvey said, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So once you have been explained of some potential dangers, it's your responsibility at that point. You've been warned, and similar sentiment in that statement. Except no one is representing me or representing the Universal Negro Improvement Association in an international or national capacity until that person can show you credentials, which must not be older than 2 months. So again, Mr. Garvey this is 1934. We talked about this in 1937 and 1936. Mr. Garvey is creating a new standard and saying that those that came under the previous standard prior to 1934, if they don't have credentials, they're not representing what Mr. Garvey feels as the future of the UNIA. Mr. S.A. Haynes of Philadelphia is one individual that he promoted and said was a legitimate representative. And you'll see his name, S.A. Haynes. When you look at the UNIA papers, his name comes up in subsequent years to 1934. Skipping through, so I believe this is a promotion for Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, volumes 1 and 2. Yeah. This is an editorial by Marcus Garvey talking about Hitler, which is pretty interesting. I think it summarizes in the last statement, the Negro will be wise if he reads a few chapters of the Hitler textbook. This is Mr. Garvey's. This is from Mr. Garvey. It's editorial by Mr. Garvey and a black man. But he had a level of respect, at least for Hitler. He was able to acknowledge how Hitler used the same ideals that he promoted, nationalism, putting your people first. It was the same philosophy as the UNIA, but being used in Germany. Just a brief thing here that I noticed. It documents the exact divorce date of Marcus Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey, and when Marcus Garvey married Amy Jakes Garvey. Mr. Garvey divorced. Amy Ashwood and Marcus Garvey divorced, secured in the state of Missouri on the 15th June 1922, just prior to his July 27th, 1922 wedding to Amy Jakes. It says after both were found guilty of adultery. So Mr. Garvey, as well as Amy Ashwood, according to the documents, divorced due to some adulterous behavior. Okay. Okay, so this is a paper article in the Negro World. So again, the Negro World stayed under UNIA Incorporated. This is one of the first documents from the Negro World saying that the UNIA Incorporated says that Marcus Garvey is no longer the head of the parent body of UNIA Incorporated. We got to keep that incorporated is always attached to that. Despite Mr. Garvey with his parent body of the Universal Negro Improvement Association Incorporated, Despite a great deal of news matter and other literature, our members and friends are continually writing to ask what connection Mr. Garvey has with the parent body of the UNIA Incorporated at the present time. Just two words: absolutely none. On and during our 1932 convention. So this is 1934, but again, I said we want to look at 1932 as well as 1929, those important years. So we'll try to look at those at a later date. But during our 1932 convention, and the New York Age was kind enough to carry 5 feature articles clearly stating the position, written by their able staff writer and columnist, Mr. Veery Johns. And it is a pity that everyone did not see them. There can be no doubt that the UNIA Incorporated and the African Community League Incorporated are the original parent bodies formed by Mr. Garvey in 1918. So this is a fact. The Incorporated was the original. But no one can disprove that the UNIA Incorporated of 1934 is the same UNIA Incorporated of 1918. So this UNIA Incorporated group is basically claiming their legitimacy based on the inception and the history. So, 1929, here we go. This was the parting of ways. The American delegates to the 1929 convention in Kingston could not agree to Mr. Garvey's proposal and returned to New York before the convention was over. So 1929 is when it officially was a split. 1932, that split became, documented and official per the two different bodies. Mr. Garvey discarded the original UNIA Incorporated of 1918 that he founded and formed a new UNIA 1929 of Jamaica and the world. This is a British association where they do not incorporate. So again, this body was unincorporated. Is this new, comparatively young body that Mr. Garvey leads today. Latest issue of The Black Man, a monthly magazine edited by Marcus Garvey. So after the Negro World stayed with UNIA Incorporated, Marcus Garvey created The Black Man as his new publication. One of the things I wanted to point out here was how they perceived his tone. But to judge from his writings, it is not the Marcus Garvey that we knew. So they perceived that Mr. Garvey had changed. And we should, it's just interesting. It's funny to me to see this, because I've studied Mr. Garvey more so at the end of his life, at an older age. But obviously, he had a younger age as well. But they said the old fire is gone, and they gave an example in this excerpt. A couple of things I highlighted: good character and the higher principles of honesty as the supreme code of life. The Negro is a new race, that is to say, within our modern civilization. And it is well that we learn the great value of good character. So they're basically saying that this was a downplay of Mr. Garvey's former tone. But it's funny to me, like I said, because when I read Course of African Philosophy, this is exactly what Mr. Garvey was trying to direct our people into. A higher state of consciousness, a higher state of character. And the only way to achieve that is through higher principles and a higher code. So for me, it was just kind of interesting that was perceived as, less fire. But I think it's a misinterpretation of what Mr. Garvey was teaching or trying to explain. We of the Universal Negro Improvement Association have no feelings but the finest for Mr. Garvey. We wish him and the association all the success in the world. We are ever willing to cooperate with them for the uplift and the progress of Negroes of the world. Parent body of UNIA Incorporated and African Community League Incorporated is going straight ahead with the work as outlined in our purposes. I highlighted this for a particular reason because they say it's outlined in our purposes. I'm trying to figure out what purposes, and they never detail what those purposes are, but we should all know the aims and objects of the UNIA, the Constitution of the UNIA preamble was all created by Marcus Garvey. So I'd like to know what purposes they are sticking to that were not, ideals that were brought forth by Mr. Garvey himself. Mr. Garvey to R.L. Whitney. He says, it is only by honest cooperation of all officers and members that the status of the division can be raised and the good aimed at can be achieved. The convention, 1934 convention, this is July, so we're preparing. August is right around the corner. The convention will give a program fit and proper for our universal guidance, and that on which we all must cooperate for the ultimate bringing about of true success. But we are always divided among ourselves, and no good can come out of confusion. But you can read that letter as well. And again, as you can see, I try to focus on Mr. Garvey's statements, his writings, not what someone else said that he said. Speech by Garvey, August 1934. So this is opening up the convention. Title of it is New Spirit of the UNIA. In 1934, Mr. Garvey speaking of a new spirit of the UNIA. Do we know what this new spirit is? Have we heard of it? Have we discussed it? We are assembled this morning at the first business session of the 7th International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World to carry out a program that has been outlined. The program will include matters directly affecting the interests and life of our people, scattered as they may be in their respective communities. So the new UNIA is talking about a program that would help our people. This paragraph is very important. It talks as to why there's always a need for new ideals. Basically, the world goes through changes. When the world does go through changes, our strategies need to change as well. So this is Mr. Garvey saying, our strategies or the strategies that he had in the 1920s, not necessarily going to apply in 1930s. So he's changing the strategies a little bit. He says the old imperial Russia has had to reorganize herself into a social democracy. Italy herself, which was an established monarchical empire, has had to modify her political constitution. In England, the most stable of empires, there's had to be great changes. So he's talking about changes to meet the new economic and social conditions forced upon them by post-war conditions. So this was 1914, 1918, the times of World War I. And it's ironic that Mr. Garvey transitioned 1940 right before World War II took place. So after these great wars, it's an opportunity for organizations like the UNIA to re-strategize. The great Republic of the United States has had to undergo great changes in readjusting her economic life, and we had good evidence of how upset the American nation was when at the last election for president that the country, the people almost revolted from the system that governed them for many years, the Republican system. That's interesting for us when we think about January 6th. This is very reminiscent of January 6th. He's saying that at the last election for president, the country and the people almost revolted from the system that governed them. That describes January 6th to a T. All this tends to show us how anxious the world is to measure up to the new world of things. So everyone is anxious to recalibrate. This is due to the fact that the civilization as a whole looks upon us, Negroes, as a people not sufficiently competent, not sufficiently able to be on our own responsibility. So can we direct ourselves? Can we govern ourselves? The purpose of this convention is to intelligently impress the world of all nationalities that in some way we are entitled to much better consideration than we are receiving at the present time. So that is the purpose of this 1934 convention, is to impress upon the world a different belief about the Negro globally. So this convention is far more serious to us than any convention we have held before. Mr. Garvey uses that quite a bit, but it's there. Depending on intelligence, we can accomplish much more than in the multitude. So Mr. Garvey was talking about the smaller numbers, and I thought this was interesting because a lot of times we have small numbers in groups, and sometimes we look at it as a bad thing. When Mr. Garvey said that's actually a good thing. It can be a good thing. He says we can accomplish much more than in the multitude where there is just emotion and enthusiasm, not sufficiently based upon good reason and upon good judgment. So again, good reason and good judgment. When you have a multitude, you don't necessarily always have good reason and good judgment. A program that will be of permanent benefit to us. And when we do rise, we will have a program to present to the world, which will be the new charter by which we are to carry on under the reorganized state of things. So Mr. Garvey's talking about a new idea, new charter, new program. And again, experience between 1914, 1918. That was World War One. Adopt new principles and new methods. Mr. Garvey says we are a very weak economic group. The basis of living of the individual and the group is organized economy. If we cannot control our own economic existence, we cannot live for long. And then he says, where does this start? They have become the employers of the world. They have become the producers of the world. They have become the controllers of the activities of civilization. And because of our lack of preparation and initiative up to this hour, we find ourselves a dependent people, dependent upon that creative intelligence of other races who were more thoughtful than we were. If we look at Course of African Philosophy, Lesson 14 is titled Self-Initiative. Mr. Garvey talks about a lot of these characteristics in that lesson and how we can overcome those characteristics and basically the consequences of not carrying out self-reliance and being dependent upon others. But this is 1934, 3 years prior to the creation of Course of African Philosophy. America has existed on charity and on sympathy within the British Empire. We have existed on charity and sympathy. He's talking about the Negro people. Isn't it sad for a race and a people as a whole, as old as the world, as old as any other group of mankind, to live on charity? So we're the oldest people in the world, and we are living on charity. He said, should we be happy with that? If you live on the sympathy and charity of a man, you cannot very well insult him, because being human and sinful like all creatures, he may reserve that charity and sympathy for somebody else. So, yeah, how can we talk, big and bad if we're living on the charity of others? Mr. Garvey says the white man could starve 15 million Negroes to death in 2 years if he wants to, because the American Negro lost his opportunity in the old order of things to have permanently established himself as an economic factor in a country where he was emancipated to full citizenship. I believe he's talking about the Liberia scheme there. The worst form of charity that any race could depend on to be fed by another without contributing to that food. It deprives a man of his manhood, deprives him of his character and his independence. But the Negro could not move from where he was. Do you see how we are playing with our lives, and we have played with the destiny and integrity of our race? Let me see what was here. These sentences be so long. Italians went back to Italy to strengthen the foundation of Italy, and every other national group post haste went back to the original fatherland to strengthen the fatherland in the new order in the preparation for the new anticipated crisis. So everyone after the war is preparing for the new age. But the new Negro could not move from where he was. Do you see how we are playing with our lives and have played with the destiny and integrity of our race? So he's talking about how some of our people have gotten comfortable in America and don't see the benefit of having a sovereign homeland. Emancipation took place 100 years ago. You will find that in Jamaica, the Negro is no better off than the American Negro. So he's just talking about it don't matter when we were emancipated, we're still in the same condition. Who to blame? Can we honestly blame anyone but ourselves? And he says, just talking about history, lesson on man, men of one family slaughtered each other. But it's, if we're the oldest people, who can we blame? Sins of men, he says, are you strong enough? And it goes back to charity again. How can you be strong enough when you are hungry, when you are unemployed, when you are dining at the soup kitchen of charity, so that you can get from charity that which will keep you for 24 hours? So until we become self-reliant, self-sufficient, we no longer dependent upon charity. It's hard for us to talk big and bad as if we are ready for an open confrontation with any other races. Du Bois is talking about how Du Bois has resigned. This is Du Bois later in his life from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He can go no further. Du Bois sabotaged the one thing that would have saved the American Negro, but now naturally he is ashamed of himself, and he has gracefully, as far as he sees himself, withdrawn from the active life because he have nothing to give. And who is there that can do better? All the leaders have been fools like Du Bois. So just saying that American Negro leaders, he's comparing them to Du Bois and using Du Bois as kind of the spokesman for American leaders, American Negro leaders. The peculiar situation is this: the people in America have now lost confidence in their leaders. If I had confidence in a man when I had 10 pounds and gave him 9 to prosecute that leadership that I had but one, and I had but 1 pound left. So you had 10 pounds, you gave 9 to somebody that you trusted, 9 to somebody that you believed in. What do you think would be my view towards that leader after he had deceived me? Mr. Garvey saying that we've had leaders that have gained our confidence, and we've contributed our funds and resources to those leaders, and we've been misled. And again, specific to American Negro, this is us. The American Negro today, a position brought upon us first by the dishonesty of leadership, by the ignorance of leadership, and by the insincerity of leadership. So these are things that, as leaders, we should try to make sure, as Garveyites, we should try to make sure we are not, or we are on the right side of each of these characteristics. I am against no Negro in the world. The policy of the Universal Negro Improvement Association is to unite all Negroes. No chain is stronger than its weakest link. The principles of the organization is to be in keeping with all Negroes because we will still be unfinished in our work, and probably that is why you see old men coming back into service. The policy is not to put any man out permanently. So when a man has kept an executive post, so he's saying the policy is not to put anybody out permanently, and we shouldn't have to. And it makes sense when he says this. He says, so when a man has kept an executive post and he has been removed, it is not that he is not a member. The only difference is that some are active members and some are not. But basically, there's no point to remove someone from the organization. You remove them from positions of power and positions of influence. But if they're an ordinary member, what power does that person have? They can't create any policy. They can't create any programs. The only thing that they can do is either contribute or disagree with. But there should not be any reason to have to put individuals completely out of the organization, because yeah, that's the way I see it. As long as they're not in a position of executive authority, they should be fine sitting in the audience.
Yeah, that's that sounds right. It is right, I guess.
This is what Garvey says. um, what program? Now, what program do you expect the man opposing you to endorse as coming from you? What would you expect him to freely and unreservedly say to you? Yes, compete with me. Take away my banks, take away my railroads, take away my steamships, take away my tramway lines, take away my utilities, have them because you are black and compete with me. So this is really what this is about. This is the essence of this program, competition, um, and developing ourselves so that we can be in open competition with any race. Um, you expect anybody in the world to do that. The relationship, therefore, of the American Negro and the American white man must be competitive. And if it is competition based upon all human principles, you must expect the white man to protect himself against the Negro as far as self interest goes. So he kind of elaborates on this. Charity, no, yeah, it is human nature. Everything is fair in love and war. But once we realize that it's about self-preservation, um, no holds bar at that point. There's nothing that we wouldn't do to preserve ourselves and our people. So we should expect the same from other races and other groups. There's nothing that they wouldn't do to protect themselves and their people. And that should be a fair expectation. So let's come to the open world of competition and let the best man win. Therefore, it is the duty of man, the individual, to protect himself. So every individual, every race is trying to protect himself. Now, if you get, now, if you get, now, if you get that, you get, okay. Now, if you get that, you get the policy of this convention and the program that we are to work on for our salvation. So again, you can read that paragraph, but it's really about accepting the responsibility of competition. Um, there's not going to be any handouts. There's not going to be any handicaps. This is a cage fight, so to speak. It's a UFC fight. It's you and your competition in a in a confined space. Um, may the best man win, and we have to be. We can't. Say, oh no, he poked me in my eye. Calling for a referee, saying that we tired, we need water. We have to be able to win that competitive challenge. And that's from a racial standpoint, not just as an individual. Convert the world. We will never be able to convert the world on righteousness. So this is Mr. Garvey talking about church and religion, and how some people try to profess, outer worldliness, above that of a human being. He says you have to just play human, and that's what the UNIA and the convention intends to do, to play human. So we're not praying to God. Well, I mean, we do pray to God, but we're not praying that God solves our problems for us. We're praying that God gives us the ability to solve our problems for ourselves. This is not, you know, this is the physical realm. So we can't rely upon, I mean, we can pray to spirits, but we can't expect, the spirits to always intercede for us. Again, this is a physical realm. We are physical entities, so we must do our job and step up as physical entities created by the Creator to function in this realm, basically. So let's not try to be, spiritual, no, extra spiritual, um, you know, but let's just be humans. Let's be men and women, and let's build our world for ourselves. Uh, don't go praying for it with the hope of getting it in the name of the Lord. The blessings of God. You will never win without him. You will always lose. Soberly and intelligently devise a scheme to extricate the suffering race in America and this suffering race in the West Indies and elsewhere. When you are a child, you are played up to according to your childish instincts. You are given lollipops and plums and tickle your taste and fancy. When you are older and you hear the dog coming, you go out of the way because you are sensible. You do not want to be bitten. Mr. Garvey talked about this in the course of African philosophy as well. He says, um, He says to go giggling, prancing, and jumping about like a child stamps you as a clown. A man must be a man, a woman must be a woman, while a child must be a child. You're a child once, a man once, and a corpse once. In the three stages, you must behave according to nature. Prance and giggle as a child, be serious and dignified as a man, and rest peacefully as a corpse. Um, so yeah, we got to grow up, and not just again, not just as individuals, but as a race. And Mr. Garvey is he's the perfect one to say that. Um, and we got to contextualize this in modern time. Well, Mr. Garvey saying this in 1934 that we got to grow up, and he can't talk to us like children anymore. He has to talk to us like adults. And he says this, he says so that when the UNIA started 16 or so years ago, so just 16 years. Right now, we're over 100 years from the inception of Garvey, but in 16 years, Mr. Garvey's already saying that we have to communicate to each other differently. We have to go from the milk to the meat, but modern day, it seems like we kind of get stuck in that milk phase. So that when the UNIA started 16 or so years ago, we had to offer the lollipop. We had to offer the sweet, but Sambo has grown to 21. No more lollipops for Sambo, but hard, concrete facts. So he's talking about how he had to approach our people. He had to approach them with kindness, with lollipops, with trinkets, and with gifts. But he's saying that at some point, and I feel like this, I feel like I've said this before. At some point, we as a people have to mature, and our message has to mature, and the rally call, the fighting call, has to mature. It can't just be let's get together to vote. That's great, that's wonderful, but when are we going to say let's get together, not only to fight and die, but to put our funds together to save our children, to protect our women. When are we going to progress and mature such that we can have those clear conversations without being sensitive about it? um, if you are to get out of the way, if you do not get out of the way, Sambo, the bulldog will bite you and you will be poisoned and die. Now, this convention, 1934, has come to a place where we are not going to offer lollipops any longer. We're going to tell the plain, blunt truth and make you free yourselves. And my friends, we can do it in no better way than by the program we have outlined in this convention. It is a program of salvation. It is a program of hope. So what is this program? What is this new UNIA? Why haven't we, why isn't the UNIA today promoting this mentality, this understanding of Mr. Garvey in 1934? Those who want to be offended, we cannot help it. So some people are going to be soft. Some people, going to be hurt by what we're saying, what we're doing. We can't help it. We are on a mission. We are on a mission of righteousness by our Creator to save our people. If that offends some, so be it. We got to get past this point of trying to appease everyone as we make progress. Some people are going to be hurt, and we have to we have to accept that. When I speak of the white man in America, I do not mean to infer that all white people of America are bad. Otherwise, we would have been dead already. We have men like Abraham Lincoln, but he says their influence is being nullified by the economic pressure. So there are good, quote unquote, good white people that have done good things for us in the past. But what Mr. Garvey is saying in 1934 is that the economic conditions of the time nullify any symbolic gestures that white people have done for us in the past. If we're not, these gestures aren't putting food on the table, aren't putting clothes on the backs, and aren't putting roofs over our heads. So they're nice, but Mr. Garvey said in 1934 it's getting old.
Yeah, that's right after the depression.
The law is there, the law of God and the law of man. He doesn't say we are to abolish the law because man sheds tears. So this is about crying. We can't just cry about it. Again, but this is that mature message. Because you show me in the book of life where it said that breaking the commandments you shall be forgiven, because you come shedding tears every time. You stand and fall by your own acts, so do not blame anyone for your racial condition. Why go to the white man weeping? Why, if you cannot go to God weeping, how can you go to man weeping? So, when we talk about asking things of other races and other nations, begging, so to speak, pleading, so to speak, if we're not willing to ask God for these things first, um, Mr. Garvey would argue that it's a disgrace to ask man for something that we're not willing to ask God for. None of us can help the other because we envy each other. So, poor leadership. If the American Negro had proper leadership, as made Rockefeller Carnegie succeed, they would have made the Black Rockefeller succeed, for they could get $10 million, and from the Black Carnegie, $10 million to help send the good work on. So, this is funny, it's 1934. So Mr. Garvey saying if there was someone like a Black Rockefeller in 1934, today we have Jay-Z, Beyonce, um, um, Byron Allen, several, F. Robert Smith. But Mr. Garvey, in his time, he was just saying, what if we had someone like that could fund our programs. It says Negroes would not need the good Negro. Negroes would not help the good Negro to succeed. If I die, you will have to know that I am going to tell you the plain truth during this convention. I do not care who wants to be vexed. I am going to give you salvation. So, very important convention, very important statements that Mr. Garvey's saying. We will have to build up a strong worldwide Universal Negro Improvement Association that will put over a program of salvation that will meet the intelligence of the world on the equal plane and match men against men in the survival of the fittest. So that is the essence of what this program is talking about. Program of salvation, meet the intelligence of the world on an equal plane and match men against men in the survival of the fittest. If we can't develop ourselves to win a equal fair fight, well, that's what Mr. Garvey was promoting with this program. Developing ourselves such that we could win an equal fair fight. Article in the Daily Gleaner in August 31st, Convention of Negro Peoples of the World meet at Edelweiss Park. So again, remember the numbers, the names, 1934, August, Kingston, Edelweiss Park. Convention is drawing to its close, and that it was announced that at the sessions yesterday, the 5-year plan of the organization, which is to be the scheme of financing the many legislations enacted by the convention during the month affecting the social, economic, political, religious, educational, scientific, artistic, literary, and commercial development of the race, was to be issued. The morning session opened with further legislation on education, and among many resolutions adopted, which subsequently became the law of the convention, was the following page. Oh, this is where they talk about they're talking about birth control at this convention, and it got pretty heated. But I'm gonna skip over the birth control stuff, and we'll get ready to go. This is the last bit that I have. After the legislation on education, the convention went into discussing the 5-year plan. The discussion was also heated and interesting. And I got in. So 1934 convention is what we just kind of walked through and touched on some of the highlight points that Mr. Garvey spoke of. So I want to jump over to Course of African Philosophy and type in 1934. Okay, so lesson 22, the beginning of lesson 22, titled The 5-Year Plan, says in 1934, at the International Convention of UNIA held at Edelweiss Park, Jamaica, so which we just talked about, President General of the Association presented to the convention in session the 5-year plan scheme as the most possible and practical scheme through which the association could rehabilitate itself and carry out the major objects of the organization. Scheme was thoroughly discussed and adopted by resolution, properly moved and seconded and carried unanimously as set out in the reprint circular from the Black Man magazine, September 1935, herewith incorporated. The amount of money collected in the plan would be appropriated for carrying out the many schemes authorized by the Convention of 1934, as set out in the circular referred to above. In explaining the 5-year plan, great stress must be laid on the fact that the Negro, to realize the object of a nation and government of his own, he must have financial security. So I just wanted y'all to understand where the last lesson, lesson 22, the 5-year plan comes from. It was extensively discussed at the 1934 convention as the best plan to rehabilitate the organization at that time. And one thing we have to realize is this is, after Garvey was deported, and as we just said, after there was a split created from 1929 to 1932, and now in 1934, Mr. Garvey is basically trying to build from scratch. And this plan was the best plan that we had at that time. But yeah, we don't really talk about any of that information. All this information I just gave you, you're not going to get anywhere in the UNIA, other than right here, Division 421, from myself, because this is not information that I have been given from the UNIA. This is information that I've had to find myself. So with the last 40 minutes, we will run through lessons 15 through 21 of the course of African philosophy. And I'm going to try to do this. I don't have the slides prepared, but we're just going to walk through it. Y'all have you got the page numbers. And I'm not going to touch on everything. So, lesson 15, titled Personality. One second. There's a graphic that I want to put to this one. Good one. That's one. All right. Gotta finesse it. So, let's see. I'm just gonna do it like this. So, yeah. All right. As I've said before, I break the course up in 3 different phases. And the image that I would give for each. So phase 1 would be like a mirror. It's our personal development of ourselves before we try to. It's making sure we're not being hypocrites. Before we go out and expect any improvement from anyone else, we must apply that to ourselves and develop ourselves. So lessons 1 through 7 is about us looking in the mirror, and addressing our flaws. And then lesson 2 that I had was the image that I had for lesson 2 was like it was like a Black Last Supper. Not lesson 2, but phase 2. Image that I got for lesson 2, phase 2 would be like a Black Last Supper. What we talked about there, community development. So after we develop ourselves, now we're trying to build a society, a social system of like-minded individuals. So concept of a dream team, Christ and his disciples, whatever you want to call it. But this is us multiplying, ourselves. Now that we've, kind of cleaned up our mentality, cleaned up our thinking, cleaned up our behavior, we were surrounding ourselves with like-minded individuals. Phase 3, however, is phase 3. The image that comes to my mind is if anyone's seen the movie Book of Eli, you become you accept you internalize the information. So it's not just about knowing it's not just about knowing it, but it's about, or not just about knowing it to the fact that okay, this is lesson 12 where he talks about that, but memorizing it, and not only memorizing for the sake of memory, but living it, walking it, walk by faith, not by sight. But phase 3 is where you actually put into practice Mr. Garvey's principles of organizing. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Phase 3, global nationhood, global economy, creating a legacy for the American race. Goal is to establish global relations built on self-reliance for the African race, understanding how to recruit / build globally, strive to achieve understanding of history and purpose of the UNIA. So that was what lessons 15 through 21 focus on. All right, lesson 15 is titled personality. And again, we're just going to go through some of these. What should we do? That's not the first question. That's the first question. A thing to impress the world with is your personality. What should your personality make people think about? And the answer is a perfect person. But personality is your aura, your essence. When you come around, when people think about you, what do they think about? And you want that to be synonymous with, as close to perfect as it can be. Man is always disposed to respect and honor those who show themselves observant to the rules of manly dignity and character. So personality is a follow-up of character, as well as a follow-up. It's a follow-up of several previous lessons. They talk about hygiene, talk about leadership, they talk about character, but it's putting all of those things together to make the package that is you. And when I say the package that is you, it's more so the package of how you are perceived by the world. That's what personality is really talking about, how you are perceived by the world. Why should you always be clean cut and presentable? We talked about that in lesson 2, leadership, but he talks about it again. Moment you throw off the reserve of your personality, you invite disrespect for your person. Because by that very good appearance, you may win the support, get out of your difficulties. But 1, people will criticize you. And 2, on the good side, you may be able to get support just based on your appearance. When we present ourselves, what is the world always looking for first? And we learned that in the earlier lessons. The world is always looking for defects. They're looking for holes in your shoes, holes in your jacket. But they're looking for a reason to say, I don't want to give this man funds, because if I give him funds, he's going to use it to fix his shoes. So we have to eliminate that excuse. To maintain good personality, you must maintain all the rules of hygiene. Brush your teeth, um, cleanliness. We talked about taking a shower at least 3 times a week, brushing our teeth, health. Drinking water, maintaining our constitution of our body. So hygiene. We need to be clean. We don't need to, be going around people unclean and not smelling proper. What leadership characteristic does your appearance affect? Mr. Garvey says it's your confidence. He says when you are clean, you feel confident as though you can take on the world. But cleanliness next to godliness, and that applies not only to our homes but our bodies as well. What does a perfect personality made through proper care of oneself give you? Gives you a passport to anywhere in the world, socially and otherwise. But it's basically, we want to be the person that's always accepted into the room. That's always, where people are asking where we are. Where's John? He needs to be here. People want your energy in the space. That's what personality is about. And with that, I think that kind of take care of personality. That sums up personality. Again, we'll go through it more in depth in the fall, but I think that sums it up. 16, propaganda. What does propaganda mean? What is the desire of propaganda? Propaganda means to propagate, to make known extensively some particular phase of human intelligence. The desire is to convert or influence the people to acceptance of the truth of that particular intelligence that is sought to be spread among them. So propaganda means to propagate. Propaganda is irregardless of positive or negative. So whether it's good or bad, has no relation of its effectiveness as propaganda. Propaganda just means to convince others to your opinion. And one way of doing that is by mass propagation. Where can we find propaganda? Again, what are the institutions? Propaganda.
I remember schools was on there.
Yes. At the end of the day, propaganda is all around us. Television, schools, cinema, pulpit, press, everywhere. Anywhere you would think of advertisements or marketing. So even on the sides of buses, the sides of buildings, our cell phones are heavily become propaganda tools. But the point there is we're surrounded by propaganda. And unless we are creating propaganda to affect others and to affect ourselves, then we are just being victims of the propaganda that's being created. And we're, so it's always around us. You can't avoid it. How was propaganda used on the Germans from 1914 to 1918? So 1914, 1918, again, important years, World War I. But Mr. Garvey talks about how in the beginning, the Germans were conceived or pictured as the height of science, the height of scientific culture. And by the end of the war, they were classified as Huns and barbarians. But it's showing how, propaganda can be used positively to enhance someone's persona, or it can be used negatively to create a negative persona to where, you create an environment in which the society demonizes certain people based upon what propaganda is saying. So if we think about after 9/11, how people felt about Muslims flying on planes and things like that, that was propaganda. We were reacting a certain way based upon the information that was being put out about a certain group of people. What are some different types of propaganda? So you've got different types: religious, literary, oral propaganda, demonstrative, or political propaganda. But basically just saying that, you're not getting away from it. You can call it different things, different types. different institutions, but it's still propaganda. Two propaganda examples in the Bible was how the angels in the Holy Family are white, and devils and the imps of hell were black. Was wash me white as snow, but using the colors of white and black to relate to good and bad. What should we do with propaganda that does not glorify our race? So again, we must be aware of propaganda. Propaganda is all around us. Even if it does not affect us, it could affect someone that is less intellectually mature. So if we see a propaganda image like what's going on now, we're having a big push against Netflix and the cartoon Good Times. So it may not be something that we, may not hurt us, or we may be mature enough to say, "Oh, that's nonsense." But we must still, as a body, as a society, as an organization, have standards of what we consider good and bad propaganda, and we believe that some of the stereotypical images that are being portrayed in media are they go against what we would want to promote in regards to our own people. So we have to fight against bad propaganda is the point. Why should we keep our homes free and clear of objects that glorify other races? Our children will grow up to adore and glorify other people. So propaganda is everywhere. Even the gifts that you give your children is a form of propaganda. Where does all propaganda come from? It's very important. All propaganda comes from the arranged desires of individuals, not from the race as a whole. So small groups of people. It is the thinkers and leaders who originate propaganda. So it's small groups of people that have created the propaganda that we are fighting against and we are protesting against. But at the same time, we are a small group of thinkers and leaders that can develop and propagate our own information ourselves. So two sides to look at that. One, it's a small group that we're working against, but two, we're a small group and we can be just as effective if we really want to. Why shouldn't we follow the propaganda of others? It may lead you to the circus tent and take away your pocketbook. But we never follow. We have to be self-directing. We never follow others' propaganda. What are customs based on? Customs are based upon the acceptance of propaganda skillfully engineered. So, Christmas, Easter, all of these holidays, this is propaganda that has been skillfully engineered. We have to be careful about how Juneteenth has become a federal holiday, and how that can, be engineered and propagated in a certain way. So, yeah, this is what Mr. Garvey say, how customs are based. Customs are based upon propaganda that is skillfully engineered. And next thing you know, it becomes a custom, and we're doing it every year. What is war? What are the aims of war? War is the hellish passions of man let loose in opposition of man. So he's got a section in here on war. It's basically the multiplication of the lesson 11 titled Man. But he talked about man being wicked. War is the multiplication of that. So just like society is the multiplication of an individual, war is the multiplication of wicked men. When you get thousands of wicked men, you get war. When do men resort to war? War comes only when men fail to adjust their differences with reasoning. So we just talked about that. We have to use good reason and good judgment. Politics. Fred Hampton, politics is war without bloodshed. War is politics with bloodshed. We're trying to avoid the bloodshed, so we must use politics, which comes down to good reasoning and good judgment. When did the first war start? Cain and Abel. Again, we talked about that in the lesson on man. Which generation has shown that man intends to become wholly reasonable? Mr. Garvey says that when you look at the history of man, there's no generation that shows that man intends to become reasonable. So don't expect that. War is the best time to take advantage of your transgressors. So it's when your transgressors are at war. When if we have an issue, hypothetically, I'm not promoting anything, but if we have an issue with the United States, is when the United States is at war, that is the best time for us to take advantage of what we want. And that would apply to any nation or subgroup. If there's something that we want from a particular group, when they're in turmoil, Mr. Garvey says is the best time to take advantage of that which you're trying to accomplish. Again, this is diplomacy, this is war strategies, but not your everyday neighbor discussions. How do you become stronger while people are warring against themselves? The more other people war against themselves, the stronger you become if you exercise good judgment. So don't get involved, but make the right decisions such that we can become stronger as hopefully anything that we're against or against us becomes weaker. What is our only hope of escaping hate and prejudice of other people? Keep them severely occupied with other problems. So that's a little bit on propaganda, but propaganda just means to propagate our forms of propaganda. UNIA-ACL government.com, Garvey Voice Magazine. Local propaganda would be our social media, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Whirlwind newsletter. But that's lesson on propaganda. Next lesson is 17, communism. Communism is basically about political ideologies. Yeah, political ideologies. Any political ideology, whether it's communism, fascism, I kind of want to say socialism a little bit, but we just have to be careful of political ideologies outside of what has been presented from the UNIA. A lot of these political ideologies are a restructuring, reformatting, representation of UNIA principles. Or you could say the opposite. UNIA principles are restructuring, reformatting of capitalism, socialism, and so forth. But the point is, if we really understand our structure, our system, there's no need for these other systems. So what is communism? What is the desire of communism? Communism was very big in Mr. Garvey's time. Mr. Garvey says communism is a white man's creation to solve his own political and economic problems. Communism's desire is for the white working class over the capitalistic class. So it's to empower the white working class over the capitalistic class of the race. Google says communism is a political theory advocating class war and leading to a society in which all the property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Who created communism? And what did the creator of communism know about Africans? According to Mr. Garvey, communism was created by Karl Marx, who knew very little about Negroes and wrote less about them. So Mr. Garvey saying communism wasn't designed for us. We weren't thought of. The benefit of the Negro wasn't in the inception of the communist ideology. What type of people are empowered in communist government? The most ignorant, prejudiced class of the white race. What is an enemy of communism? Enemy of communism is the capitalistic white man for the preservation of his own interests, if nothing more. So Mr. Garvey felt that communism and capitalism naturally went against each other. All the outrages in war, mob violence, extreme punishment were done by what class of people? Mr. Garvey says the lowest class of white agents. I don't have to worry about that one. What is the Negro's greatest enemy? Negro's greatest enemy is the common white man who does not have enough intelligence to know the injury that he is doing to a race. So I think that kind of summarizes communism pretty well. Created by Karl Marx, who knew very little about Negroes and wrote less about them. Communism tends to empower the most ignorant, prejudiced class of the white race. And the greatest enemy of the Negro is a common man who doesn't have enough intelligence to know the injury that he is doing to the race. So effectively, communism is trying to empower the Negro's greatest enemy, which is the ignorant white man. I think that kind of takes care of communism. Yeah, well, we touched it. The mob has always been made of what type of people? So again, what is communism? What are we against? The mob has always been made up of the lowest class of the white race, common ignorant people from whom communists are made up and whom the party is intended to give political power and economic advantage. So it's very straightforward as to why we disagree with communism. What must the Negro do in regards to communism and why? Let the communists fight their own battles and stand back and watch the fight. He would be helping to bear the brunt of the battle with no guarantee that his economic condition will be better, but objectively worse, because it will help to transfer government from the more intelligent and cultured in behavior to that of the ignorant, more prejudiced, and more cruel. So Mr. Garvey felt that communism was not as good. He felt capitalism was a little more cultured, was more cultured than communism. That's kind of a good takeaway. Yeah, both systems were empowered the white class, but he felt that communism empowered the ignorant white class, whereas capitalism empowered the, I wouldn't necessarily call them intelligent, but financially wealthy class. What do we, when we are asked to join the Communist Party, what should our response be when you get to Russia, but not before then? So when they figure out their problems, get their stuff together, we'll help them. But until then, we need to focus on our own issues, our own problems, self-reliance, self-determination, self-governance. 15 minutes, we are good. We're good on time. Running through this. Review of lesson 18, commercial and industrial transactions. So this is the phase 3 version of economy. But yeah, commerce and industry. So, I was gonna say commercial, but that's commerce. Big business, I think is the best way to say it. What previous lessons, lesson 18 build from? Commerce and industry are the feeding props of the economic state of life. So economy. When it comes to business and industry, what two positions do we have? You can either be an employer or an employee. So right off the back in the beginning, we want to be working, Mr. Garvey encourages us to focus on the employer aspect. What does it take to become an employer? I think lesson 10, economy, is more so from an employee. Well, no, not necessarily, because he has some entrepreneurial aspects there, but he talks about, saving your personal wages and things like that. But here he is definitely encouraging us from an employer standpoint. He gives us some different types of commercial enterprises: grocery, lumber, ironmonger, mercantile, dry goods, clothing, tailoring, retail, wholesale. So commerce, yeah. So commerce is the transacting of what I would consider refined goods, somewhat refined goods. Industry is the procurement of raw goods. So pulling the pulling the so even lumber. I think lumber is a good example because I've talked to some people about this. So like chopping down a tree, I think would be considered industry. But when we turn it into like 2x4s and things like that, that's when it becomes commerce. Manufacturing. But yeah, it's just, one industry is pulling the resources from the earth. Commerce is the transacting of the refined resources. That's a simple way that I remember it. Most successful business people in the world started with what? A small amount of capital. So we don't need a lot of capital, according to Mr. Garvey. We just need a small amount of capital. Start small, know our industry, know our business. and grow from there. What has been the fault of the Negro in business? The fault of the Negro in business, commercial or industrially, has been his inability to appreciate starting at a given point and climbing steadily. So, we just need to start somewhere, be consistent, be diligent, and continue to work to build. We sometimes we get caught up in, and I guess rightfully so, big picture ideas. We don't want to work to get $100 and then get $1,000. No, get $100, then get $500, then get $1,000. Slowly, slowly, slowly. We want to know, how do we get $100,000 right now, which is fine. But you have to think, how long do we sit and discuss this plan to get $100,000, and how much are we missing by not executing the smaller plans? So, Ms. Garvey, again, the fault of the Negro in business, commercial, and industrial has been his inability to appreciate starting at a given point and climbing steadily. What happens to people who do not have commerce and industry? Mr. Garvey says they perish economically. But that's, again, going back to self-reliance, self-governance. We don't have our own. We're relying on others. Eventually, we will perish. So that's not a state that we desire to be in. What does Garvey believe is the safest kind of government for persons of individual initiative who desire to go into business under, and why? Mr. Garvey promotes democracy as the kind of government that offers to the individual the opportunity to rise from a laborer to the status of a capitalist or employer. So Mr. Garvey promoted democracy because he felt that it gave the best opportunity of what we consider a rags to riches story. So it is what it is. When we acquire property, what should we always make sure we get? Value for our money. Who regulates the property market? Real estate brokers and agents, and the mortgaging and trust company who take mortgages on property, according to Mr. Garvey, page 145. As far as the Negro is concerned, what is the custom of real estate brokers and mortgaging companies? According to Mr. Garvey, he says to sell the property at a value higher than it's worth, but basically making sure we don't get the right value for our money. What two places should we go in order to find the real value of a property? According to Mr. Garvey, he says we should go to the official registry of records and titles for records of titles and the government registry. How have the majorities of Negroes in every country lost their property? He says that majority of Negroes lost their property by being tricked to pay the interest and never paying on the real value of the loan. So never getting to the principal, but paying the interest. So we got to make sure we understand that relationship between the interest and the real value or principal debt. What are examples of charitable institutions? Charitable institutions include hospitals, homes for elderly, homes for the blind, asylums, etc. Why should we give charity? Who should we give charity to? Ms. Garvey says charity begins at home, and your race is much nearer to you than a neighboring one. So we should. Who should we focus? Why should we focus on race first in charity? One destiny, never allow him to fall, because as low as he goes, he may ultimately pull you down with him. So this is from a race standpoint. If we allow our neighbors to fall, they may pull us down with them. As high as you can send him up, he might ultimately pull you up with him, according to Mr. Garvey. It is like casting bread upon the water to come back to you after many days. So looking after our race, making sure that we rise together. We rise together. Why should we help maintain charity? We may need charity someday. Charity should always be maintained for its own good, to benefit those who may be unfortunate enough to need it, and the next person to need it may be you. So, we're serious about charity at 421. As y'all saw, we just did a charity program a couple weeks back. We will make sure that, as of 2021, we've had a charitable fund, and we've tried to make sure at least once a month we carry out some type of charitable program per the teachings of Right Excellent Marcus. I'm sorry, Garvey. That's lesson 18, commerce and industry. Very, very powerful lesson, honestly. That's why I try to take my time on that one to go through each of the questions. I think that's one of the most pertinent lessons for us today. It's one of the most underused lessons for Garveyites today. Lesson 19, a great lesson, winning mankind by kindness. So we just came out of lesson 18. In the second half of lesson 18, Mr. Garvey touches on charity. He follows that up with lesson 19, winning mankind by kindness. So we're kind of wrapping up the lessons at this point, putting a bow on our teachings as we're preparing to go out into the world. But these are the last 3 lessons, 19, 20, 21, and very well put. And I think they're great final lessons to prepare us to go out into the world to recruit. What has the ability to move all the hearts of men? A touch of kindness has the ability to move all the hearts of men, according to Mr. Garvey. What does it cost for us to be sympathetic to other people's feelings? It doesn't cost anything. And that's a very important concept. Kindness doesn't cost us anything. So there's a lot of things that we can and can't do in the world for whatever reasons based on resources, but being kind, being sympathetic, that doesn't cost anything. And as diplomats, that's something that we have to develop. As diplomats, that's something that we have to develop because you can't always show your hand. So even if you are upset or rightfully upset or displeased or, preparing to go to war with someone or a group, you have to be diplomatic enough to still be able to approach them with a smile and not let them know the intentions of what's going on. How should you win the world to us? With a smile, with a hearty handshake, with a glad welcome. But we're going out to the world. We are trying to win the world with our kindness, with our personality, with our character, with the example of Christ that we learned in lesson 5, leadership, intelligence, understanding, universal knowledge, and how to get it, elocution. So all of the previous lessons, this is what it should be building up to. Where does the money from the UNIA come? Where does the money come from for the UNIA to do charity? Charitable fund of the organization. Every division should have a charitable fund. But there should be no excuse as to why we should not do charity as well. What is the name of the UNIA parent body charitable fund? We should know our leadership charitable fund is called the African Redemption Fund. And we as a division and as members should be contributing to that fund. Also asking, how that fund is being utilized. What is the purpose of the organization? I'm guessing that's the UNIA. On page 153, Mr. Garvey says, helping the needy, the distressed, to assist all the members of the race who need help. So that's really just aims and objects number 3 and 4, to assist the needy, reclaim the fallen. But that's some of the purpose of the organization. Once people have recovered from their bad condition, what will the pillar on which the organization sit? So Mr. Garvey felt that if we were charitable, if we helped people to overcome their ailments, their gratitude would allow would be a pillar on which the organization would sit in the community. What should every division of the UNIA have in order to do charitable work? Every division should have a charitable fund. Hard to win mankind by kindness, or it's easier to win mankind by kindness if we have charitable efforts. If men remember you for nothing else, they will remember you for this. Mr. Garvey says they'll remember you for the kindly deed, the touch of sympathy that seldom comes from others. And what is the duty of every member of the UNIA? Mr. Garvey says, above all, we have a duty to be kind. So we are representatives, we are Garveyites, we are leaders in the UNIA. Very first thing that we must carry as we go out into the world and work with our people, even with other people, we must be kind. Lesson 20, lesson 20, titled Living for Something. Another very good lesson, very well placed lesson towards the end of the text. But it's about being a captain of our own ships. It's about having a legacy and something to live for beyond ourselves. What is the purpose of life? Mr. Garvey says the purpose of life is expression. You can also argue survival and recreation from a science standpoint. But Mr. Garvey on page 154 says the purpose of life is expression. How do you find your purpose? Mr. Garvey says you search yourself with the knowledge of what is good and bad, select your course, steering towards the particular dream or desire. So we got to search ourselves, and as we learned in lesson 6, align our free will with the Holy Spirit of goodness. And when we're able to do that, you'll be able to find your purpose. What should we never enter life's journey without? Mr. Garvey says we should never enter life's journey without a program, but basically a goal. What is the analogy of life without a program? Life without a program is like a ship without a sail. So you're just at the will of the winds and of the sea to take you wherever the world sees fit. But if you have a program, that's like being on a boat where you have a sail, you have a destination, you have a rudder in the back, and you can, direct yourself through and around obstacles to get to your destination. But you have a goal, you have a purpose, you have a plan. That's what living for something is about. Finish the quote. If a thing is worth doing, quote finishes, it is worth doing well. And he's talking about living life. If life is worth living, it's worth living well. And part of living a good, well life is living for something, and having something to live for. If you want to be somewhere in January, when should we start planning? We should start planning. If you want to be somewhere in December, sorry, when should you start planning? Mr. Garvey says in January. Very important hidden little nugget there. But when it comes to any of our events, we always do this, and we always as a people, it seems to be a part of our nature. We never plan a year in advance. Juneteenth is every year. Malcolm X Day is every year. African Liberation Day is every year. Garvey Day is every year. HEC is every year. Convention is every year. But I know for one, this past Juneteenth, it's like we as a division just didn't really know what was going on or what was to be expected, as if this was the first Juneteenth in existence. Garveyites, leaders of the UNIA, officers of Division 421, if we want to be somewhere in January, we need to be planning. If we want to be somewhere in December, we need to be planning in January. Garvey Day is coming up. We should have been planning for Garvey Day since September of last year. HEC will be here again next year. We are not planning for HEC. We're not planning for convention. We have not planned for Malcolm X Day next year. So I know some people, this is new information, and you're not held responsible to that, but we got to be serious about the teachings of Mr. Garvey. We have to be serious about our, do we want to be quote unquote Garveyites? Do we want to be followers of Mr. Garvey's teachings, or do we just want to be members of the UNIA and do our own thing? But Mr. Garvey gives us clear recommendations. So I would urge us to follow them. And if we don't follow them, as Mr. Garvey said, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. We should understand what to expect. We didn't plan, we didn't prepare, so we are unprepared. Why is that a surprise? I gotta fix these slides. What does it mean to live for something? Living for something, the title of this chapter, doesn't only mean something for yourself, but something for your kith and kin and something for your race. So living for your future, living for your people. 5:02, I'm going to wrap up within about 10 minutes. What should the policy of every Negro be? To live for something to hand down to a son or a grandson. So the policy of every Negro should be to live for something, to live beyond yourself. Really, that's really kind of what it's about. We become a fairly selfish people. We've lost our connection to divinity. We've lost that ability to see, generations ahead and generations behind. When we think about the benefits that we have today, and when we think about our ancestors, our ancestors had the mentality to understand that the sacrifices they made, hundreds of years ago, um, you know they won't benefit them that day, but they will benefit us today. um, Today we've kind of lost that ability to of foresight, the ability to sacrifice for several generations ahead of us. It's today is kind of all about us and all about right now. Um, what is the result of things considered a waste of time? No great fortune is guaranteed. No great art is accomplished. No structure is built. It is a game of chance. So, doing things without a plan, there's no guarantee of success. What should we be if we have no purpose in life? Alternative to having no purpose, Mr. Garvey says it's better to be dead than to have no purpose in life. Um, what happens when we see beauty through the eyes of the Anglo-Saxon? We envision the homeliness and ugliness of our features because we are not like the Anglo-Saxon. So we must see things through our own spectacles. Um, that's another thing about this course. Mr. Garvey says that the purpose of it was to instill a fierce Afrocentric perspective. So I think of another way I personify this course is a pair of glasses. You know, once we go through this course, we should see the world differently. We should see the world such that we create it for the benefit of our people, and anything that is not for the benefit of our people, we destroy. And I don't mean that in a violent or unlawful way, but I mean that from an ideological standpoint. So yeah, we have to put on our course of African philosophy, Afrocentric glasses, and see the world such that it is able to benefit our race. But that also includes how we see ourselves. Our broad nose, thick lips, curly hair. We should see those through Afrocentric eyes. And Afrocentric eyes would see those as um, characteristics of beauty, characteristics of nature, characteristics of the image of God. And we should see those things likewise. But we should not see beauty through someone else's eyes, because what is that? Because we don't look like them. So that automatically by default puts our physical characteristics outside of the definition of beauty. All right, what are we doing when we are wasting time running around helping others with their problems? We are robbing our race of the time to solve our problem. So that's that charity outside of home, people, signing up for different groups, doing different things, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. But if we're not helping our race, we are robbing our race of the time to solve our problem. And if we're not, these resources that we're providing to everyone and everything else, if we're not providing to our people, we're robbing our people of those resources. And a lot of our people, Mr. Garvey says in this text, the majority of our people are ignorant. So most people don't even know that they are, robbing their race. We must never forget that all other groups in society or community are looking after what? Everyone is looking after their own individual interest. So we must do the same. And last, we got 21. Give me 1 second. Let me get y'all some questions for 21. Um, Study guide. Yeah. All right, lesson 21. I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. This is one of the longer lessons. But again, this is the capstone prior to the 5-year plan. But this is putting the that capstone on top of our course of African philosophy training. And the last thing Mr. Garvey teaches us as we're preparing to go out and evangelize or be apostles of Garvey and his teachings, the last thing he teaches us is what he titles the history of the UNIA, where he kind of goes over a lot of the history and how it can be explained, how it can be taught, especially. What is the purpose of the UNIA? Oh man. All right, I'm gonna have to answer these myself. No, I'm not gonna get. I don't want to get that one wrong because they got like purpose, the aim. Purpose of raising the status of the Negro to national expression and general freedom. That's the purpose of the UNIA. First meeting of the organization was held. I'm not gonna be able to do this. Okay, 1914. Yeah, I don't have the. I know it was 1914. 1914, he got a group of men together, women in the city of Kingston, and there he organized the association. Um, Name of the institute and the organization that Marcus Garvey visited for support and encouragement, will receive little encouragement when he first arrived in America. Those two organizations was NAACP and Tuskegee Institute. He went to both of those organizations to get support for the program of the UNIA. He had the aims and objects, but he got little support from those. What was the name of the 3 facilities that Garvey used for mass meetings? We don't worry about that. After Garvey arrived in Harlem, how long did it take for him to establish the first Liberty Hall? I believe it took 18 months. Yeah, 18 months. First International Convention of Negro Peoples of the World was held August 1st through August 31st, 1920. To know what is the UNIA, what must we do? Very important question. But it is to read the Constitution from cover to or front to back. To know what the UNIA is, you must first read its Constitution and Book of Laws from cover to cover. You must also read the literature written by the founder bearing on the activities of the organization. Preamble of the Constitution is vitally important. But as Garveyites, to know the UNIA, we must first read the Constitution from cover to cover. And again, that's another question. How often are we as the UNIA reading the Constitution? We had a good session prior to HEC, and we'll have another one prior to convention. But we get into this mode of just professing Garveyism in the UNIA, but we're not studying the fundamental text that Mr. Garvey promoted, or it is the fundamental texts that make up the organization. Which parts of the Constitution are vital, important, used to defend the organization in courts among the government authorities, and that is the Constitution. Why was the preamble of the Constitution written? To defend the organization, basically. What are the 2 separate functions of the UNIA and ACL? UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, is a fraternal organization. ACL, African Communities League, is the business organization. List 2 UNIA businesses from Garvey's time. Negro World Magazine, Black Star Shipping Line would be probably 2 most prominent. Which private individuals are intended to own capital in UNIA businesses? Page 166. I'm gonna read that one from the book because it's important. No private individuals are intended to own capital of any of these enterprises because these enterprises were organized as future ones will be organized only for the purpose of supplying funds by way of profit to the UNIA to carry out its aims and objects as laid out in the Constitution of the UNIA in interest of the race. So very clear. Mr. Garvey does not necessarily promote private ownership in regards to UNIA businesses. I'll put it that way. Okay, what are two different types of membership in the UNIA? Active member and ordinary member. Active members are dues paying, ordinary members are members by race. True or false, all properties of the UNIA and associate business corporation companies are enterprises are to be held in trust for the Negro race. Page 167, 171. On page 167, all the properties of the UNIA and associate business corporations, companies, or enterprises are held in trust for the Negro race in the relationship of the race through the active membership in the organization as explained above. When property is bought in the name of the organization's name must be mentioned, and only the names of the officers of the organization at that time must appear as officers, not as individuals. So, again, Mr. Garvey stressing collective organizational ownership, I guess. If you visit a division of the organization as an official representative of the parent body who is the superior officer, you would become the superior officer as a representative of the parent body. What are some arguments for the continuation and perpetuation of UNIA? You can find that in the book, page 173 to 176. There's several bullet points that Mr. Garvey lists to encourage the promotion and continuation of the UNIA based on the accomplishments of the past. What should we do when we come across responsible people of the race? I talk to them about the UNIA. I don't know. When you come across a responsible person of the race, take their names, profession, and address after talking to them about the association. Then send the same in a weekly report or a monthly report to the President General. So that's organizing. Yeah, when we come across people responsible, organize. Make sure we get that information, and that information becomes a part of UNIA membership eventually. Nothing invites antagonism more than it's like being rude, I think. Nothing invites antagonism more than arrogant and unreasonable display of power. So being arrogant and unreasonable display of power invites antagonism. But again, we're at this stage, we should be thinking of ourselves as delegates and representatives of the UNIA. So as we go out to different areas, we're not only representing ourselves, we're not only representing our division, but at some point we will be representing the parent body of the UNIA. And we must make sure that we give off the right personality. Most people of the world are the most modest when dealing with those who goodwill they depend on, but being humble. What is our chief aim as officers of the UNIA? So this is important. Your chief aim must be to organize every man, woman, and child. And if with all this material and possibilities, you cannot make the UNIA succeed in that community, you yourself are a colossal failure and not the people. The greatest recognition of your merit and ability. So this is, I'm glad I'm pointing on this. You know, I've talked about this before. This is not about getting a graduation, getting a certificate, and telling people, yes, I've completed the course of African philosophy. I've gone through the training of Mr. Garvey. The text says the greatest recognition of your merit and ability will be reflected by the number of people who are members of the association in your community, district, town, or state. Their activities will testify to your greatest activity in their midst. So some people, you know, will say like, yeah, I know all of that. I got it. I've done it. You know, I'm a master of that. But when it comes to their ability to organize and increase their numbers, you don't see it. So the text says you can tell who has mastered this information based on their ability to organize and grow their divisions. What is the greatest recognition of your merit and ability as a UNIA officer? I just said that. The ability to grow the organization. What is the best time to call on people for support? It's after they have eaten. It's like noonday. Couple more questions. What are conditions where the UNIA can receive funds outside of the Negro race? We're not gonna talk about that. But it's a special condition, and you basically just have to document that the person giving you funds is not a Negro so that they don't get communication from leadership. But it's basically saying, you know, we can receive funds from other races. What type of people should we never hang around? Page 185. Based on what we learned in page 1 on lesson 2, we should not hang around people that we can't learn from. But let's see what he says on page 185. What type of people should we never hang around? Make appeal into financial failure. Always be in a position. People always will never approach anyone for help. Never hang around people who are always discouraged, despondent, poverty stricken, poor, and never do well. That goes in relation to what we learned on lesson 2. Don't be around people that don't inspire us, that don't, pretty much. Why must great care be taken in watching and controlling the actions of the African Legion? African Legion can have the UNIA outlawed or banned by government based on their actions. You just got to make sure the Legion stays in line and they don't go off doing their own thing because basically, they can make the whole organization look bad by trying to do something good. Why should we keep a close eye on African princes, chiefs, and princesses who come into the UNIA meetings? Mr. Garvey says that if they were legitimate royalty, then they would have individuals represent them. They wouldn't be coming into the meetings themselves. But we just have to be careful of illegitimate representation and falling for illegitimate representation. But with that, it's 5:20. That completes the 21 lessons of the course of African philosophy. I encourage everyone to study the 5-year plan on their own. That's something that we will continue to push to our leadership at the upcoming HEC as a policy. But I don't have anything else. Any questions or comments before we close? Okay. If there aren't any questions, we can close out and get a little bit of rest before orientation. So if you would, Sister Diane, you want to close out?
Okay, sure. One second.
Okay, sure.
Ready?
Ready?
Yeah, echo.
How's that?
All right, better now. It's better.
Everyone,
Everyone,
put your right fist in the
put your
air
right fist in the air
and repeat after me.
and repeat after me.
one God,
one God,
One God,
one aim,
one aim,
one aim,
one destiny.
one destiny.
one destiny.
Africa
Africa
for
Africa,
the Africans,
for the African,
those at home
those at home
and those abroad.
and those abroad.
those abroad.
Race first, everyone.
Race
Peace
first.
and love.
Everyone, peace and love.
Great job.
Great job, Brother John.
Brother John.
All right, that wraps this up.
That wraps this up.
Normal Saturday next week.
Normal Saturday next week.
I think we got executive meeting, but all right, race first.
Race first.